Busting flat, Baton Rouge, waiting for a train. Feeling nearly faded, there's no chance. Bobbing flag, diesel gun, just before it rained. Took us all the way to New Orleans.
You're listening to Rip and Common Sense Radio.
That's right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight and every night this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we open up the Art Bell Archives and dive into the lost classics of a vocal treasure. We take a look at those stories and we bring them up to date and we share them with you. We ask for your input and your shout-outs, your call-ins, as we go through the most amazing stories ever told. Tune in tonight and every night as we reinvestigate the Art Bell Archives live.
The Art Bell Archive Show.
Rip and
7
Rabbit
p.m.
Hole
Pacific,
is a
10/9
community-driven
Central.
radio.
RipandCommonSense.com.
At times, the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rip and Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Art Bell Archive live show. I'm your host, AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Buckle up your seatbelts, folks, because tonight we're blasting off to the edge of the solar system in search of Planet 9. The planet formerly known as 10. It goes by many names. Some of you might recognize it as God's planet. Some may know the name Nibiru. Either way, it's all the same concept. And down the rabbit hole we travel tonight as we investigate fascinating subject, bring it up to date to standard for today, Friday, December 6th, 2019. How many planets do we have in our solar system? 8. Wasn't it 9, though? What was the 9th one? What happened? Pluto. Pluto. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the research that we've been doing, in particular new evidence that there might actually be the 9th planet in our solar system, which is not Pluto. Art Bell frequently would speak of an existent planet. It went by many names, as I said, Nibiru, Zeta, Planet X. And Richard Hoagland in 1995, during the Hale-Bopp phenomenon, as the comet graced our skies, it was suggested on the Art Bell AM Coast to Coast radio show back in 1997 that Hale-Bopp perhaps was not a comet, and that perhaps Hale-Bopp was some intelligently driven star-like object, perhaps even a planet. Now, this was a bit of a radical thought in 1997. Of course, as Y2K was approaching with the year 2000, there was an extra sense of panic amongst certain individuals who took hold to the theory of the 9th planet. Not just that it was existent, not just that it was out there, but that it was out there and it was on a collision course with Earth. And of course, the doomsday scenario had a field day with this because Y2K was rapidly approaching and people were on nerves anyway. So guests like Mark Hazelwood on Art's program would address the highly controversial relationship between a myriad of records from science, religion, and prophecy, all relating to the effects of the passage of our 10th planet at that point. So after the downgrade of Pluto, the 8 planets in our solar system moves the hypothetical planet back a position as well. Now Planet X, or Nibiru, referred to today as Planet 9. Now, the first 6, which includes our Earth, have been known for a very long time. Humans have been around for maybe about 1 million years, and they probably saw it up in the sky. They're visible with the naked eye. The 7th and the 8th planet are not so simple, however. Uranus, for example, can barely be seen with the naked eye. Now, I remember a lot of discussions in science class, and maybe it's the Mandela effect, I'm not sure. I remember all of these planet discussions, but I don't recall learning Uranus. I would have had a lot more fun with Uranus in science class if our teacher actually explained to us that Uranus was there. Either way, you're unable to spot those planets with the naked eye. If you go into a very dark place and you stare at the sky for a very long time, you might be able to spot it, but Neptune is totally invisible to your eye. Let me start with a little bit of history of what we know about our solar system. Uranus was the first planet to be discovered using a telescope that was about the size of a normal desk. We now know that it orbits around the sun at an average distance of about 19 astronomical units. 1 astronomical unit is the average distance between the sun and the Earth. Now that's a lot of space. Neptune, for instance, was actually predicted before it was discovered. So, 2 things we know from the history of our own solar system. Number 1, if Planet 9 is out there, it is far away. And it's been predicted before it's been discovered. As we're going to learn tonight, updated information, the prediction of the 9th planet is very real. By the time 2003 rolled around, of course, Y2K hadn't taken place, and the new topic on the horizon was the year 2012. Coast to Coast AM and Art Bell had an interview with Marshall Masters September 5th, 2003, on this very subject of the extra planet. As the information began to grow publicly, NASA worked very hard, including recruiting Dr. David Morrison, a PhD, a NASA senior scientist, who went to work to discredit the thought of an extra planet. NASA worked very hard for several years to make sure the public didn't buy into this fear tactic possibility. Listen closely.
I'm a NASA space scientist, and I want to talk to you very briefly about Nibiru. I'm doing this because I received a note from a 12-year-old girl recently that said she wondered if the video I made 2 years ago was still valid, that she and her classmates were scared about Nibiru, and could I please explain, from a science point of view, why we know Nibiru is not real and is not a danger. You know, the simplest thing to say is just that there is no credible evidence whatever for the existence of Nibiru. There are no pictures, there's no tracking, there's no astronomical observations. In fact, the origin of the name is a little weird. Nibiru was a minor god in the Babylonian pantheon, probably associated with Jupiter. There's no record that they ever thought of it as a planet. Sometimes we talk about Planet X, but that's a strange term too, because astronomers say Planet X for an object that has not been found, a possible object, like Pluto. When it was being searched for, it was called Planet X. Once it was found, it became Pluto. So there really isn't any evidence here to counter, but I can quite specifically say how we know that Nibiru or Planet X does not exist and does not threaten the Earth. First, if there were a planet, headed into the inner solar system that was going to come close to the Earth in December of 2012. It would already be inside the orbit of Mars. It would be bright. It would be easily visible to the naked eye. If it were up there, you could see it. All of us could see it. And the crazy thing is people who say they are observing it but never tell us where to look so we can verify. Well, it doesn't take an astronomer to say that there's no bright object up there that's appeared in the night sky and is headed for Earth. Second, if Nibiru were real and it were a planet with a substantial mass, then it would already be perturbing the orbits of Mars and the Earth. We would see changes in those orbits due to this rogue object coming into the inner solar system. Astronomers measure the orbit of Earth and Mars precisely and frequently, and there has been no change whatever. Third, and perhaps most telling, if this object had come through the solar system in the past, and you remember the idea is it's on an orbit of 3,600 years. If it had come through in the past, its gravity would have messed up the orbits of the inner planets. The Earth, Venus, Mars, probably would have stripped the moon away completely. Instead, in the inner solar system, we see planets with stable orbits. We see the moon going around the Earth. The very existence of this stability in the inner solar system proves that no rogue planet, no interfering object has come through the inner solar system in at least 1 million years. So it's not real. Nibiru doesn't exist. We can't see it. We can't detect its gravity. And we don't see a signature of its previous passages because there weren't any. Now, some people change the story around and say, well, Nibiru isn't even a planet. It's a brown dwarf with planets going around it or something like that. Everything I've said would be worse with a massive object like a brown dwarf. That would have been tracked by astronomers for a decade or more, and it would already have really affected planetary orbits. So please, get over it. Nibiru isn't real. Planet X isn't real. We don't have to worry about this hoax.
NASA's official statement, get over it. We don't have to worry about this hoax. Now, when that was recorded in 2011, it was very easy for NASA and David Morrison, the PhD NASA senior scientist, to go along with that hoax rhetoric. Because our computers, our technologies, our internet, our satellites, our telescopes had not been developed and refined and defined in the way that they are in 2019 today. Now, interesting to note, that was 1 year before 2012 and the Mayan calendar ceasing to exist. Again, in 2016, a few years later, and just a few years ago, NASA sticks by its side, trying to once again prove to the public Planet 9 doesn't exist. Back in January 21st of 2016.
Hi, I'm Jim Green, Director of Planetary Science at NASA. You know, NASA works with the international science community to explore our solar system and beyond. We look to unravel the mysteries that intrigue us all as we explore and answer the big questions. Questions like, how did the Earth originate and change over time? How did the solar system begin and evolve? And what will be its destiny? What will be our destiny? Last July 14th, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto, capping a half-century of exploration of our solar system. It piqued our interest about what lies beyond Pluto and what can we learn about ourselves and the origins of our solar system. The idea of a new planet is certainly an exciting one for me as a planetary scientist, and I think for all of us. The January 20th paper in the Astronomical Journal is fueling our interest in planetary exploration and stimulating a healthy debate that's part of the scientific process. I couldn't be more pleased about what's happening. You know, it's all about starting the process that could lead to an exciting result. It is not, however, the detection of a new planet. It's too early to say with certainty that there is a so-called Planet X out there. What we're really seeing is an early prediction based on modeling from limited observations. What's exciting is that, like NASA's journey to Mars or New Horizons flyby of Pluto, you will have a front row seat to see how the scientific process unfolds. Theories like this serve to stimulate ideas and conversation. They tap into our innate curiosity. It's important for us to continue to work, and we will. Anytime we have an interesting idea like this, we always apply Carl Sagan's rules for critical thinking, which include independent confirmation of the facts, looking for alternate explanations, and encouraging scientific debate. If Planet X is out there, we'll find it together. Or we'll determine an alternate explanation for the data that we've received so far. Now, let's go explore.
Wow, how motivating. Thanks, Dr. Green. Let's go find it together. Or
we'll determine an alternate explanation for the data that we've received so far.
Back in the 2012 discussion, another man, Billy Carson, a leader in extraterrestrial study, and many others were going around explaining that we were being told something doesn't exist when it does. Let's listen to how Billy explains his challenge of 2012 period of time in modern academia against the known knowledge existent today.
A lot of people are still scratching their heads saying, what in the world are these guys finding? How are they finding them? And we bring them to our sites and we show them how we find them, and they go, wow, because we want everybody to find them as well. It's not like we got this secret potion and we're just like holding it in and saying, here's an image, look at it, this is how we found what we found. We're saying, no, here's the source link, here's the technique, here's the method. You go out there and look at it as well and see what you can bring in, see what you can find out for yourself. And a lot of people are shocked who didn't believe it even existed, and they go to these source links for these space agencies and pull down these images and find anomalies. So we're going to go into a little bit about talking about space today, and I want to give everybody an idea of how big space is, where we're from, and how can these ancient civilizations exist within our solar system, and how did they even get here? Because we talk about the fact that there's been ancient civilizations and there's technology being found and these megalithic structures have been built. But okay, well, how did they get here? Where did it come from? Like, what is the source for this stuff being left behind?
And it is a great question. What he's saying there pertains exactly to what we talked about last night with the horned giants. Now, if you didn't get a chance to hear that episode, you can visit ripinrabbithole.com at any point in time or see us on YouTube. All of our episodes are archived there. But he's exactly speaking to the point we spoke about last night. These rabbit holes are all connected together. The structures of the man mound, the search for Planet 9, reverse speech, Mandela effect, time travel, CERN, all of these rabbit holes are connected.
This is a Hubble telescope image here. It's called the 2 Trillion Catalog. It's got Skybook, I'm sorry. It's got some of the most amazing galaxies out there, but it's found so many billions and billions of galaxies just in a very small piece of the sky. I mean, when you really look at the grand scale of things, our solar system is just it's less than a small dot. It's not even the size of a grain of sand compared to what's out.
Now, we've made these pictures that he's discussing right now available at the link in tonight's show notes below this video. If you click that link, you can see the images that Billy Carson is referencing.
This is our actual galaxy, the Milky Way, and you see where our sun is located on one of these outer rings, and we have a solar system right there. It puts in perspective, I mean, just in their own galaxy alone, there's actually inhabited, in my opinion, millions of planets inhabited in our galaxy. So let me talk about where we came from, because the Milky Way galaxy is actually not where our solar system came from. And a lot of people still don't know this, and the history books are just now starting to get changed in schools. But scientists now know we're not from here. Imagine the shock of growing up with a loving family with people you call mom and dad, and then suddenly learning that you are actually adopted. This is the same sense of shock that came as scientists announced that the sun, the moon, and our planet and its siblings were not born into the familiar band of stars known as the Milky Way galaxy, but we actually belong to a strange formation with the unfamiliar name as the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy. So we are aliens to this galaxy. We all are aliens. This entire solar system is an alien.
Now, I knew there was a reason I loved Reese's Pieces.
Basically what happened was the Sagittarius dwarf system was actually swallowed up by the Milky Way, and is still being swallowed at this present time. Using volumes of data from 2-micron all-sky survey, which is in the 2-mass infrared mode, which is the best mode that I love when I do my sky watching, a major project survey of the sky in infrared light led by the University of Massachusetts, the astronomers are answering questions that have baffled scientists for decades, proving that our own Milky Way is consuming one of its neighbors in a dramatic display of ongoing galactic cannibalism. The study published in the Astronomical Journal is the first to map the full extent of the Sagittarius galaxy and show in vivid detail how its debris wraps around and passes through our Milky Way, and the Sagittarius is 10,000 times smaller than the mass of the Milky Way, so it's getting stretched out, torn apart, and gobbled up by the bigger Milky Way. So right now, where our intersection is in our solar system is directly where the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy meets. So we are literally newcomers to the Milky Way galaxy, and this happens all the time. Bigger galaxies swallow up smaller galaxies, and sometimes two galaxies will collide to form one massive galaxy. It just happens all the time. This is a sky view of it. This is released in a scientific journal. This is peer-reviewed science, guys. This is not like, I wonder if this is true or is this a conspiracy? No. This is changing the history books right now today as we speak. Okay? This solar system is not part of the Milky Way originally. We've basically been dropped here. We are from another galaxy in the process of joining with the Milky Way. This Milky Way is actually not our present galaxy. The mystery of why the Milky Way has always been sideways in the sky at night has never been answered until now.
Now, you're going to want to see that picture that he's referencing. Again, if you click the show notes and go over to rippandrabbithole.com, tonight's show notes, we have these images. But Billy is starting to get very interesting here. Listen closely.
Wandering in the void, billions of rogue planets without a home. There's billions of planets out there just wandering through space with no sun and no solar system. This is very important information. Planet 9 could be our solar system's missing super-Earth. There's been a planet now discovered by NASA. According to the ancients, it already existed, according to the Sumerian tablets. Another planet out there. It's just orbiting around our sun in a very strange elliptical orbit. And now NASA has actually officially said, we found it, and they call it now Planet 9. This is the orbit of Planet 9 released by NASA on nasa.gov. It has a very strange elliptical orbit around our sun.
So now, in 2019, nasa.gov is talking about this planet in almost certainty. We're going to hear more about that in just a moment. But again, keep those show notes open so you can reference that picture he's talking about, that orbit, in comparison to the Milky Way on its side. Back in 1995 and 97, there was no known schematic of orbit. And now we seem to have mathematical proof of its orbit.
But I don't think it's just a planet by itself. I believe that it has a brown dwarf orbiting along with it based off of my research. And now NASA as well seems to agree that this is probably a brown dwarf star with planets orbiting it. So we have a solar system in our solar system. We live in a binary solar system. In other words, there's two stars. One star is a brown dwarf, which is not a completely failed star. It's just not as big and bright, but it has the same amount of mass. Gravitational mass is our star, which is the reason for a lot of global warming right now. Global warming is not because of cows passing gas and you use too much hairspray. I'm not trying to make fun of it. I mean, we've contributed to it, don't get me wrong, with corporations and chemicals and emissions and everything else. But the amount we've contributed to it is very, very minute compared to the gravitational waves that are flowing in and through our solar system at this present moment from this supermassive brown dwarf star. and its planetary bodies that orbit it. Gravitational waves have now been officially detected and marked, it was a year and a half ago, into the science books by NASA and the European Space Agency. So stuff that I've been talking about since 2012 is now all coming to fruition. And this is all just based off of research and investigation. Now, did they know this back then? They probably had the theory of it, but now they've come up with the scientific proof that it's real.
But now they've come up with the scientific proof that it's real. But maybe it wasn't just them. As we're going to get into in the second segment tonight, we're going to talk about the mathematics behind this theory of Planet 9 now that NASA does seem to support, given the fact that NASA.org, like Billy spoke about, does indeed have a page dedicated to hypothetical Planet X. It's right there. I'm going to include the link to that. Also, we're going to talk more in the second segment about the mathematics, about the discovery, about what we know today in December of 2019. Crazy how time is moving. Can you believe how fast time moves? Phenomenal. Unbelievable discussion here on Planet 9 as it will continue in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break here at the bottom of the hour, and we'll be back to go forward into the depths of the solar system with our discussion on Planet 9. It's time again to update those textbooks in this ever-changing world of science.
Is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Art Bell Archive Live Show. I'm your host, AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Buckle up your seatbelts, folks, because tonight we're blasting off to the edge of the solar system in search of Planet 9. The planet formerly known as 10. It goes by many names. Some of you might recognize it as God's planet. Some may know the name Nibiru. Either way, it's all the same concept. And down the rabbit hole we travel tonight as we investigate fascinating subject, bring it up to date to standard for today, Friday, December 6th. All right, a quick look at the upcoming schedule for the rest of the weekend. Tomorrow night, Saturday, December 7th, you're going to want to tune in at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, because Moneybag 73 will be our guest. He's a Mandela Effect researcher coming back to the program again after a fantastic first appearance. We're going to do Mandela music tomorrow night. He's bringing along with him examples of alternate lyrics and musical changes present within the Mandela Effect. A lot of respect for Moneybags 73, probably the premier YouTube authority when it comes to documenting these types of effects and changes. He has over 400 videos, and you get a chance to talk to him. That's right, tomorrow night we're going to open up the studio call-in lines. The wild card line will be open for Moneybag 73, and you can call in with your questions or comments. you're going to want to join us. That's tomorrow night, Saturday, December 7th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then Sunday night, we'll do Anti-Gravity, a look at extraterrestrial technology, perhaps. Some things right on the crust of the horizon. That's Sunday, December 8th, 2019, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Rippin' Rabbit Hole. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us on YouTube or visit us at rippinrabbithole.com. Join our mailing list. It's a pleasure. We update our website every Monday night. You can see our schedule there at Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Just click on Listen Live. And at the bottom of every page, there's a little red microphone, little shout out. You can record up to a 30-second message, send it direct here to the studio, and we'll play it on air. In fact, I'm going to be asking for those shout outs in just a few moments. So if you've got something to participate and add to the conversation tonight, get ready to do so. Now, you can only do that feature once per hour, so save it for when the shout-out request comes in the second half here. As we get back to tonight's discussion, Planet 9, here on the Art Bell Archive Live Show, Friday, December 6th, 2019. Can you believe 2020 is almost here? Back so long ago, it seemed like so far away. Yet it's 2020 in just a few days. The rabbit hole adventure continues and leads us down the adventure and shoots us out to the edge of the solar system for tonight's discussion, Planet 9. And if you were here for the first segment, we got a good understanding of how this legendary discussion, how this planetary story has evolved since Art Bell and Coast to Coast mentioned it back in 1995 and 97, in 2000 and 2003. And of course, the story just continues to grow and grow and grow. And now what we once knew to be a wild, harebrained doomsday theory or conspiracy, even called out by the likeness of NASA, the space agency, is starting to become clear in 2019 that there is something out there. And at the bottom of the hour, we told you about the page, and we've linked it in the show notes, for the hypothetical Planet X. Now, NASA's overview basically tells us that Caltech researchers have found mathematical evidence suggesting there may be Planet X or Planet 9 deep in the solar system. Now, this is a hypothetical Neptune-sized planet. It orbits our sun in a highly elongated orbit far beyond Pluto, as Billy explained, and those pictures in the show notes illustrate. The object, which the researchers have nicknamed Planet 9, could have a mass about 10 times that of Earth, and the orbit about 20 times farther from the sun on average than Neptune. It may take between 10,000 and 20,000 Earth years to make one full orbit around the sun. Where does that put it on its trajectory today? Where exactly is it? Is it out there? Is it getting closer? Oh my goodness. Let's not focus on a doomsday scenario. We don't need to do that. This is exciting times that we live in, and the mathematical proof that NASA is willing to back in 2019 tells me this is an exciting find. Led by an exciting young man from Caltech named Konstantin Batygin. He is a rock star of astrophysics. literally a rock star. In addition to following his father's footsteps in music, Constantine is also the lead singer of a California-based rock band. So literally, he is the rock star of astrophysics. Now, he's a Caltech researcher. Dr. Konstantin Batygin, in fact, he's the professor of planetary science, the Division of Geological and Planetary Sciences for California Institute of Technology. Now, in large part, NASA's solar system exploration at nasa.gov page about this planet largely credits Constantine and his partner Mike Brown in their research and discovery. It goes on to say, in January 2015, Caltech astronomers Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown announced new research that proves evidence of giant planet tracing an unusual elongated orbit in the outer solar system. The prediction is based on detailed mathematical modeling and computer simulations, not direct observation. The possibility of the new planet is certainly an exciting one for me as a planetary scientist and for all of us, said Jim Green, director of NASA's Planetary Science Division. Boy, it's funny how words get eaten, doesn't it? But I understand where Dr. Green is coming from because these things do require debate. But the Caltech scientists believe Planet X may be that orbit planet that bears all these names. And what are we going to call it? Well, Batygin and Brown nicknamed their project and their predicted object Planet 9, but the actual naming rights of an object go to a person who actually discovers it. So would they give the credit to Batygin and Brown at this point? If it appears in the not-too-distant future, would they be credited for discovering it, or would they rely on somebody who sees it first? The name used during previous hunts for the long-suspected giant undiscovered object beyond Neptune is and has been Planet X. If the predicted world is found, the name must be approved by the International Astronomical Union. Planets are traditionally named for the mythological Roman gods. So let's listen directly to Mr. Batygin in what perhaps could become the name.
That's something we don't think about and don't talk about.
You don't have a name in the back of your head?
Only David Bowie. Yeah, there's an online petition on change.org to name Planet 9 David Bowie, and I thought it was kind of silly initially, but then there's this whole David Bowie mythology that you could create, kind of some news. You could have Ziggy Stardust and Starman and all of these things. So kind of would be kind of remarkable if we had Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and David Bowie.
Okay, now that Constantine has proved he's cool and truly is a rock star of planetary astrophysics, going so far as to actually name his discovery David Bowie. Wow, we're not worthy. But perhaps there's a better name, and that's where tonight's shout out is, what would you name Planet 9? That's what I'd like to hear from you. This ought to be fun. You can go to rippandrabbithole.com. On the bottom of the page, there's a little red microphone. Send a 30-second message. What would you name Planet 9? Or, if you can't come up with a name, let us know if you're in favor of David Bowie. I will play them on air before the end of the broadcast tonight if you send in your shout-outs now. If you're listening on demand or in podcast rebroadcast, I will play them before tomorrow night's Saturday Night Mandela Music episode with Moneybags. So you can send your shout-out in now. What would you call Planet 9? I'm going to tell you, though, David Bowie is going to be a tough one to beat. That's for sure. So I was curious if this kind of a discovery for such a cool planetary astrophysicist as Constantine, I was wondering if it's daunting.
I try not to think about it too much. I'm actually really excited about the next part of the project, which is the astronomical search for Planet 9. We have, released the prediction of the orbit, which, in effect is what we worked out using our mathematical modeling. I really want to know what it looks like. I want to catch it on camera. If you sort of get in a spaceship and fly away from the solar system, what you'll note is that as you zoom out, the orbits of the so-called Kuiper belt, so this distant field of icy debris, they all begin to sort of point in the same overall direction, and they all kind of begin to lie in the same plane. So whereas I would say the orbits of the Kuiper belt, where the part of the Kuiper belt that Pluto is a member of, kind of is uniformly distributed. I mean, it looks more or less like a squished donut. The outermost orbits are really pointing in the same direction. That's a cosmic one-way sign, if you will, that there's some gravitational effect which is keeping all of those orbits confined. As our modeling shows, the only reasonable explanation for that is the existence of an additional giant planet in the solar system, and using the properties of the orbits, we can actually deduce what the orbit of our distant planet is and what its mass is. I guess, one thing I could say, however, is that this is not the first time that a planet in the solar system has been discovered through mathematical modeling and just looking at its gravitational effects. In fact, Neptune was predicted using very similar techniques, of course, without computers, just with lots and lots of paper. So we feel pretty confident about this. I think there's a good stimulus to participate in the astronomical hunt now.
So how do you go about hunting for this ninth planet?
Well, there are sort of a few telescopes that are perfectly suited for this. One of them is the Subaru telescope in Hawaii, which is the Japanese National Observatory. And basically, once you have the orbit, and we believe that the planet resides in sort of the outer third of its orbit, then you just start mapping out the sky.
And that mapping is a finite process.
So the remarkable thing about solar system astronomy, and particularly planetary solar system astronomy, is that as an endeavor, it has been highly inefficient. Okay, we have discovered, since Galileo's invention of the telescope some 400 years ago, only 2 bona fide planets, right? The first one was discovered in the year 1781. Okay, it was discovered by a astronomer by the name of William Herschel. He worked for King George, and his job was very simple. Simple, not easy, right? He would just scan the night skies every night, would draw what he saw. Now, one night he noticed that the place where he drew a particularly dim star was slightly different than where he drew it the night before. He went back the next night, it had moved again. He realized almost right away that this dim object that was moving very slowly across the night sky was not just an asteroid, it was not just a comet, it was a legitimate distant planet. Okay, so this is how the 7th planet in the solar system was discovered, because after all, everything out to Saturn, right? So Mercury, Venus, of course, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, you can just see with your naked eye. So these 6 planets were known to the ancient civilizations, and the first planet in the solar system that was truly discovered astronomically was not found until the late 1700s. So what mathematicians realized right away after this discovery is that if you track this motion of this tiny distant planet, you can go back to journals of astronomers from the past and reconstruct its orbit. Okay, so very quickly, the orbit of this planet was reconstructed, and immediately they noticed that something was horribly wrong. Okay, and this was really put together into a nice set of tables, right? The fact that the reconstruction of the orbit, right, was beautifully reconstructed by Alexis Bouvard. He was the director of the Paris Observatory, which is less than 2 miles away from here. He put together this manuscript in 1821 where he pointed out that something is horribly wrong. This planet, okay, Uranus, is deviating away from where it's supposed to be. Now, Leverrier has always been an inspiration to me. Did my undergraduate thesis on the extension, on kind of the long-term extension of his work. But something that I've kind of learned to do when I was an undergraduate, well, because I didn't have any money, so I was living in a crappy apartment in Santa Cruz, and bad part of town. So I learned how to spot a gangster. Okay, like you can look at Leverrier, it's a gangster. Okay, you can tell because he's got the bling like on the outside, right? His stage name is Urban Leverrier. So we're surrounded here with great art, and in the Louvre, I've been told that sometimes artists take like some liberties with how they paint people. So I did my best to reconstruct what Leverrier actually looked like, and I think it was like this. I think he was kind of a thug. You too, by the way, can download the Thug Life app on your calculations in 1846. He came, that this was all happening in 1846, played a tremendous role. Why? As it turns out, Leverrier and his contemporary, Adams, who was doing a similar calculation in Cambridge, both got the mass and orbit of Neptune slightly wrong, right? So here's the real orbit in 2011, when Neptune was back to where it had started. Both Leverrier and Adams would have gotten better. Sure. You don't have to be like an expert. Most of them are confined to the determined orbits in the Kuiper belt. As you can see, it's not really a belt, it's more of a donut. It's got this vertical.
Again, in the show notes listed in the video below or in the links below, you will find the pictures that Constantine is referring to. You'll want to pay attention and see as he speaks in reference to these images
of the structure of the Kuiper belt. And for a long time, there weren't objects that violated this rule. Until about 2004, when Mike Brown, who is my partner in crime on this work, discovered the object Sedna. So you don't have to be like an expert in solar system astronomy by any account to note that something is different a little bit about Sedna, right? Something is horribly wrong, right? This orbit at its furthest point, right, goes out to 1,000 times the distance between the sun and the Earth, right? This is a huge scale, right? This is not a regular member of the Kuiper belt. But what I would argue is that the fact that it's so elliptical is not that weird. What's weird is that it's not elliptical enough, okay? What the weirdest thing about Sedna is not that it goes out to a far region of the solar system. It's that at closest approach to the sun, it doesn't hug the orbit of Neptune. What does that mean? That means this object could not have been emplaced into its current orbit through interactions with the planets that we know of alone, right? Some other gravitational influence was needed to pull out the closest approach of this orbit, to stretch it. Yeah? So, generically speaking, in astrophysics, when you have one object, one data point that doesn't match the pattern, the explanation for it typically goes like this. People say, well, this Sedna, something bad happened to it a long time ago, 4 billion years ago. Stars and stuff were flying. I don't know. Something bad happened to Sedna. Okay, that was the explanation. But then, okay, a few years later, in 2014, Joe Biden was found orbiting the solar system, okay, on a trajectory very similar to that of Sedna, okay? And this was not, we actually didn't find it. This was found by Chad Trujillo and Scott Shepard, two different astronomers. And this discovery was actually the inspiration to do the work that eventually led to the Planet 9 hypothesis. The key thing that I want you to notice is that this object, which was nicknamed Joe Biden because when you discover an object in the solar system, there's this license plate that gets attached to it, and the license plate of this one was 2012 VP 113. Okay, so astronomers are actually not that good at jokes, right? So, right, you can see the fact that Joe Biden also, at closest approach, doesn't hug the orbit of Neptune. Some other gravitational influence is needed. So Mike Brown, my colleague, and I thought, okay, well, what's going on over here? Let's look into this much more closely. And something that we immediately found is that if you just concentrate on the most distant orbits that we know of in the solar system, they all swing out into the same direction, right? I mean, this is simple, and I'm surprised that we were the first people to really notice this precise alignment. You can see that they're all kind of in the same plane, right, which is tilted with respect to the plane of the solar system by about 20 degrees. They're all pointing into the same direction, right? You might say, okay, well, so what? Okay, so what? Well, as it turns out, if you were to leave the distant solar system alone in this state on a geologically short time scale, a couple 100 million years or so, right, this pattern would disperse. The orbits would randomize. Right? The fact that they're all still pointing into the same direction means that there's some distant gravitational pull which is keeping them confined. Okay? So this was really the origin, the first piece of the puzzle, right? How do we explain both the fact that the orbits of Sedna and Joe Biden are detached from Neptune, and why are they all pointing into the same direction, right? Well, this is just a quote from my favorite film of all time, right? Strange things are afoot in the distant solar system. Okay, so you can go and do some calculations, right? Inspired by very much same type of theories as what Leverrier developed in the 1800s here in Paris. And I would like to really thank the organizers for allowing me to take the next 48 minutes to discuss this slide. You know, it's a dear slide to me. No, I'm kidding. By the way, I gave like a variant of this talk at a math department one time, and people said, "Stop! All your other slides are bad. This one is good. Let's talk about this one." Okay. So what you can do is you can kind of write down equations which stem from something called perturbation theory. This doesn't give you the exact answer, but what it tells you is that if this source of gravitational pull comes from a distant planet, right, a yet undiscovered planet in the solar system, then the planet must have a mass which exceeds that of Earth by a factor of a few, right? This can't be a small thing. This can't be another Pluto. This has to be a super Earth. And as dramatically, its orbit can't be a circle. Right? Most planets in the solar system just go around on kind of circular orbits. This one has to be different. Its orbit has to be appreciably elliptic. So the advantage of living in today's world as opposed to the 1800s is that we have vast computational resources available to us. And I think I should here give credit where it's due. Caltech, the organization where I work, it kind of prides itself on giving support to kind of crazy ideas. So when we came and said we would like to take over our division's entire computational resources for a couple of weeks because we think there's a planet in the distant solar system, they said, yeah, you should, yeah, go ahead. So this is what we came up with, right? We actually ran thousands of these simulations. And these simulations are long-term evolutions, like synthetic long-term evolutions of the solar system over its dramatic lifetime. They start out 4.5 billion years ago when the Kuiper Belt, the field of icy debris beyond Neptune, was first scattered out. Okay, so it's represented as this kind of mishmash, unorganized, right, set of highly elliptic orbits. And we run time forward, okay, introducing both the gravity of the planets that we know of, which are confined to right here. This is, for scale, the orbit of Neptune. This is 30 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun. By the way, if you look very closely over here, you'll see the Earth. Actually, my house is over there. You can see it. And then what we allow the system to do is to evolve self-consistently. I apologize for this technical hiccup here. And just kind of the gravitational and body evolution to unfold. So what we see in time, okay, and we're about 2 billion years into the solar system's lifetime at the moment, is that in time, orbits that started out pointing into the same direction as Planet 9, which is shown here as this big pink ellipse, disappear from the system. What happened to them? Actually, they've been kicked out into the interstellar medium. They've left the solar system, never coming back. But the orbits that survive are ones that are predominantly, okay, confined to looking the opposite direction, right? And by the way, you guys see this too, right? I'm not alone in this. Okay, then the theory is right. So it took actually a while to understand why they're anti-aligned instead of aligned. There's a complicated reason for why, but we kind of understand it now. But one of the remarkable things about this discovery, that introducing a planet on an elliptic orbit, which is a few Earth masses into the distant solar system, both explains why the orbits are confined together and how their orbits get detached from Neptune, because as they rattle around in here, right, their orbits grow less and more elliptic in time. So you can kind of see the cycling of regular Kuiper Belt objects becoming objects like Sedna and Joe Biden, then going back to being garden variety Kuiper Belt objects. So this of Japan, it is the right machine for the job. And we do something very simple. We do what Herschel did. We take a picture of the night sky, and of course we take many, and then we go back the next night and we do the same thing to try and find that slow-moving, distant spot of light. The telescope itself is quite remarkable. This is what it looks like. For scale, this is me, and in all reality, it's actually somewhere in like this region, right? I think that's the most probable region for the location of Planet 9. So my hope is that on a time scale, much less than a decade, right, we'll be back to a full-fledged 9-planet solar system.
If I was in charge of naming a planet, I might pay tribute to Nikola Tesla and name it Nikola.
If I were to name the next planet discovered in the solar system, I would name it something like Jemison. I would name it this because it would be named after May Carroll Jemison, one of the first African American women.
You're listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio. Stay tuned for live music, news, information, and talk radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site.
Ripon Common Sense Radio with the Ripon Rabbit.
Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Stay tuned for live music, news, information, and talk radio. You're listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Give yourselves a round of applause for spending another Friday evening with me, discussing and dusting off the Art Bell Archives live as we investigated Planet 9. I'll tell you what, it's there. Make no mistake about it, it's there. It had many names. It had many connotations. It was the speculation of conspiracy and perhaps even frantic lunacy. But today, in 2019, we learn it's a reality and it's coming our way. Keep your eyes up towards those skies. Perhaps you'll see it tonight. Join us tomorrow, Saturday night, Mandela Music, special guest Moneybag 73. Mandela Effect researcher will be here. He's going to have a whole new collection of musical wonders that will fool not only our ears, but our brains, as he says. Then Sunday night, we finish off the weekend with a discussion on anti-gravity. It's going to be a great end to our weekend here at Ripon Rabbit Hole. My name's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Thanks for hanging out with me. From me to you, wherever you may be, I bid you a good evening, a good day, a good morning. Take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Such a creature like this, a human body and a red face. Oh, they call it Mr. Rabbit. Oh, Mr. Rabbit.
Once there was an old man living in an old house down by the lake. Rumors said the man was hunting for rabbits just for fun. Since the day the rabbit disappeared for a while, then came back and cast a spell over the old man. So he looks like a rabbit too now.
Such a creature like this, a human body and a red face. Oh, they call it Mr. Rabbit. Oh, Mr. Rabbit. Oh, Mr. Rabbit. Oh, they call it Mr. Rabbit.
You are listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio.
That's right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight and every night this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we open up the Art Bell Archives and dive into the lost classics of a vocal treasure. We take a look at those stories and we bring them up to date and we share them with you. We ask for your input and your shout outs, your call ins as we go through the most amazing stories ever told. Tune in tonight and every night as we reinvestigate the Art Bell Archives live.
The Art Bell Archive Show, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, RiponCommonSense.com. listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio. Stay tuned for live music, news, information, and talk radio.
Ripon Common Sense Radio with the Ripon Rabbit.